And joining us now, Islander legend, Hall of Famer, four-time Stanley Cup champion, the one and only Clark Gillies. And Clark, when we think about the Islanders at Nassau Coliseum, for me, I go back to May 24th, 1980. When you think about that day, the first Stanley Cup for the Islanders, what's the immediate thing that goes through your mind?
I was up very late that night.
You don't have to tell us everything.
Actually, I was up for about 3 days, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But, no, just awesome. Obviously, a great memory. Bobby scoring that goal so there it is right there, 7-11 of overtime. Somebody said, "What were you doing? How excited?" I said, "I had my head down. I just got off the ice. I was so tired. I had my head down, and I heard the scream. I looked up, and everybody was jumping over the boards, and I realized it was over." That was a long haul. That was our first cup. Not the first time we went deep in the playoffs, but the first time the outcome was what we wanted. And we were all pretty exhausted. But after, the adrenaline, I didn't slow down, like I said, for about 3 days. So it was a lot of fun.
Clark, we were talking just a second ago off camera a little bit about that 1980 team and when things really got ramped up for you. I was a young kid that grew up in New England. I loved my big, bad Boston Bruins. I was a little younger than EJ at this time, just for the record. But they came into town. You guys absolutely stood up to them and fought back. Was that one of the bigger moments, or what's one of the biggest moments, in your opinion, for what drove you to such massive success as a team?
Well, honestly, that was a big turning point for our team. I'll tell you a quick story. We got in the night before the game. Game one in Boston. We had just beat LA. We got into Boston. I was rooming with Bob Nystrom at that time. And the 11 o'clock news came on, and the anchor passed it over to the sports guy. And he said, "What do you think about the Boston Bruin Islanders series?" And he said, the Bruins will intimidate the Islanders so badly that they won't even want to show up. And I thought Bob was going to go through the TV to strangle the guy. and then he turned on me and he said, "We're not going to let that happen." He said, "You got O'Reilly, I got Wensick, Howie's got Cashman," and he went down the list from Jonathan to the whole list. And it was a very quiet first game. I think there were only a couple of minor penalties. We won 1-0 in overtime, and then all hell broke loose in game two, and it stayed that way for a while. But I think we really proved as a franchise, not only were we a great, talented hockey team, but we were also a very tough team that could back up everything else.
Clark, the big news is that the Islanders are returning to Nassau Coliseum, the site of a lot of those great victories from the past. When you think about this team coming back there, are you kind of surprised that it's worked out this way, that they're coming back at least for the interim time in between when the team ends up in that new building in the Belmont Park site?
I'm very pleased. I've been to a lot of games at the Barclays Center. It's a beautiful arena. It's just not a beautiful setup for hockey. I was at the Coliseum on Wednesday. We did a little media preview, took a tour of the locker rooms, both home. What they've done for the Islanders is tremendous. And the visiting players aren't going to be too disappointed either. They did a nice job. I never really got a chance to sit in the stands that much to watch our games, but the sightlines at the new Coliseum and the big seats and the way they've got the whole place, they talk about, people make a joke, it's like putting lipstick on a pig, but I'll tell you what, the old pig looks pretty good. And everybody that goes to the Coliseum for these games, I think at the end of the day, I think you probably have most of the Islander fans going, "Why don't we have all 41 games here?" I think they're going to pack the place. They can get 14 to 14,500 people in there. They're not doing that at the Barclays Center. So I think it makes sense. That's up to Gary Bettman, but I would love to see him back here full time for the next 3 seasons. It'll be interesting to see if these guys do well in the 21 games or 20 games they're playing at the Coliseum, and they actually make the playoffs. Where do we play the playoff games? Would make sense to me to play them at the Coliseum. but that's not up to me, of course. But I think it would be so exciting.
And what are you most excited about in the new building? Is it that, obviously, having played on the visiting team a number of times there, was never overly impressed with the locker room setup for us. But what are you so excited about in terms of the changes now in the new building? Because I have obviously been over there. I've seen that you can now actually walk around the bowl, which was something that was challenging during the intermission.
Well, they tried to put as many seats in as they could, and they put in these private boxes, and it stopped the full circle at the Coliseum. But they've reinstituted that. They've put in some new restaurants. They've actually put in a few more toilets for people, which everybody would be happy about. But the thing that I'm most impressed with is that the everything is new. It looks like for all intents and purposes, it looks like a brand new building. These sight lines, compared to what people are used to at the Barclays Center, when they get in the building, they're going to be going, "Oh my God, why did we ever leave this place?" And it's. I think everybody's just going to be so thrilled. I, as a former player, and now a very big fan of the New York Islanders, was just so impressed. The locker room, they did a tremendous job with what they had to work with down there. The players are not going to be inconvenienced in any way. As a matter of fact, all the players are going to be very happy. Instead of an all-day affair to get back and forth to the Barclays Center, they can go 10 minutes from Garden City or Manhasset, or most of them live right around the general area. So it's going to make it much easier for them. The fans are going to have a much easier time, and when they're in the building, they're going to be treated to very raucous, very loud, excited group of fans. And I know from a player's standpoint, when the building's full and it's rocking, it adds a little extra adrenaline, and I think the players are going to feed off it very nicely.
Clark, this day and age, there are so many of these new buildings. All the buildings kind of look alike in so many ways now. The Coliseum will be a little bit different than that as kind of a throwback. But when you played, what was the one or two places that you loved to go as a visiting player?
Well, I don't know. I grew up in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. The biggest rink there was 2,000 people. So, I got to the Coliseum. I thought that was the best place I've ever been in. Places to play in that were a lot of fun were the Spectrum in Philadelphia. When that place was 17,770, I think is what it held. And when they were screaming at you, you could barely hear yourself think. The Boston Garden was an amazing place to play. But compared to today's rinks, your practice rink is better than those rinks. But it's just the atmosphere of the Coliseum, and the remember back in go back to 1980 when we come out for Game 6 with an opportunity to win the Stanley Cup. I had chills running up and down my back. It was so loud, and the people were so into it, and that atmosphere has been missing a little bit for this franchise. And to get that back tomorrow, and I think all the games they're going to play at the Coliseum this year, that'll be the same atmosphere. And as I said earlier, the players are going to thrive off of that. They're going to play better in that environment, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
All right, Islanders back at the Nassau Coliseum starting on Saturday night. They take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Clark, thanks so much for the time, and thanks for all those wins back in the day. It really was nice sitting there rooting you guys on. Easy as a fan.
Well, listen, AJ, it was a great time in all our lives, and it's a period that I will never forget and always cherish. So thanks for having me on, you guys, and I'm looking forward to that game tomorrow night.